as I'm pleased to be joined by the Oilers Director of Amateur Scouting, Tyler Wright. Tyler, thanks so much for doing this. Obviously, a very different year when it comes to a lot of things, including the NHL Draft. And let's maybe start with that. How challenging has the COVID-19 pandemic made it for you and the rest of the scouting staff?
Yeah, it's definitely, 2020, it's been obviously a different year for everybody, not just in general in sports. And it has been challenging, but at the same time, all 31 teams right now are, facing the same challenges. So, we know it's an important part of our season. It's the most important part of a scout season is the draft, and make sure you're having, enough preparation. So just trying to be creative and coming up with different ideas and new kind of ways of thinking. Some of these European kids are actually playing and starting up again right now. So it's coming, something that we've never really had before. So yeah, it's been challenging, but it's exciting. We know we're going to get a good player. We got to make sure that we're prepared and ready to go for the 9th and 10th.
So Tyler, what exactly have you done different this year as a result of the circumstances? Are there areas along the way that you maybe encountered efficiencies and improvements in some aspects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've reached out to all the scouts and gave them some time to think, when this kind of pandemic put a halt on things, and try to come up with new ideas. Bring something to me that we think that we can use to improve our staff, improve our way of thinking, utilizing different platforms as far as video conferencing, video scouting, all these different things. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that we have done that I think that we will continue to kind of implement into our program going on. And there's stuff that we look back at and maybe revisit some drafts. Obviously, this is my first year working with this group of guys here. So we've had a learning curve for both myself and our scouts, trying to implement our philosophy that we want, and how we want to scout and how we want to create our lists. So it's been challenging. It's been exciting. It's been good dialogue. Obviously, with the 14th pick, there's 13 decisions to be made before us, but we're pretty confident that we're going to get a pretty good player.
Question. My next question was exactly that. How are you feeling about the caliber of players that should be available in and around that 14th overall area?
Yeah, it's a good mix. In this draft of forwards, defense, and goalie, and we're gonna have good options. I think at when it comes down to 14, it's just really gonna be the preference, and it's the same boring dialogue, and it's the same boring cliche thing saying that it is going to be the best player. But at the end of the day, you do have to take the best player that you deem. I shouldn't say you deem, but that we deem as a staff at that particular spot. So, and obviously, there's other things that come into play. I think a lot of time the draft is, the teams are done playing, and it's kind of a salary cap kind of tool where people are trading players and picks. And, there's obviously an opportunity for us to either move up or to move back. In this draft, we don't have a second in this year's draft. We have to make a decision with our 3rd round pick in the James Neal draft. We either have to give it up this year or we got to give it up next year. So we've got some decisions to be made here. And I think that'll start really get the ball rolling here once, the first week of October and leading up in towards the draft.
So Tyler, you just touched on it. No 2nd round pick. You have to make a decision as a result of the James Neal trade last summer, and no 4th as well. I know it's ever changing, Tyler, but is there an appetite to maybe acquire more picks with how strong this draft class may be, or are you guys comfortable with where you're at right now?
Well, as scouts, we're always pounding the table to get more picks, obviously. But at the end of the day, you have to be realistic of where we're at, as a franchise, where we need to improve, how we're going to improve, how we're going to go about doing that. I think we've made strides as a group this year, but we need to get better, and it's going to start with us in this draft. There's always good players that go later. We got to make sure that we're turning every stone over and giving us that opportunity to make that pick. At the end of the day, if Ken Holland deems to get us some more picks, and because we really like some players, I think he's going to do whatever he can. But at the same token, you have to be prepared to play the cards that you're dealt with. And right now that's no second, no third, no fourth. So, can we recoup some later in the draft by going back? That's a possibility. Do you move up if a guy slides? All that's kind of time sensitive, just kind of to when the draft actually starts.
Now, in regards to that third round pick, which will either be transferred to Calgary in 2020 or 2021, again, as a result of that trade, how much dialogue have you had with Ken Holland in regards to that?
Yeah, I've talked to him. Obviously I talk to Ken almost on a daily basis, but I really think that decision's probably going to be made maybe the day before, see how we do maybe at 14 to see really kind of what happens. Seeing who's left on the board, to be honest with you. If we deem that we could maybe, forfeit the pick now and take a swing for the fences maybe later on in the draft, or if we deem that there's a player now and at the end of the day, it's really his decision on whether we want to just go ahead with it, make the pick, or we give it up right now and we move on. So I really think that's going to be a decision made just prior up to the pick, to be honest.
Now, whoever the Oilers draft in October, which already sounds weird to say, normally they would be invited to Edmonton for Oilers development camp. But what will be the next steps for this year's Oilers draft class?
Probably getting the tote bag in the mail, maybe. It's, there's so much uncertainty. Obviously, we're going to be running a draft online. Myself and Ken Holland will be in, kind of our own little war room in Edmonton for that time. Not going to have any staff really around me. Have them being kind of video conferencing call or on conference call, kind of on standby as far as trying to inform them what's going on, who do we like, and vice versa. So there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously. With the startup, we're not really sure when training camp's going to happen. A lot of these kids, hopefully are going to be, especially in Europe, they're up and running already. Yeah. Some of the U.S. schools and Minnesota high schools and that stuff are starting to ramp up now. The CHL Quebec League starting October 2nd. The Western Hockey League and Ontario League, I think they've got a target date for December 1st. So realistically, it's going to be a draft. It's going to probably be some video conferencing calls, maybe with their family, to kind of introduce them to the Oiler organization and kind of what we're looking for, kind of some steps going forward as far as training and areas of improvement and the culture that we're trying to develop here in Edmonton. And everything seems to be on video conferencing as I'm having this video conference with you. And we're just going to try relay as much, information we can and teaching and learning skills for these kids to, I shouldn't say kids, young men, to go back into their, respective clubs and continue to work. Getting drafted is the easy part. It's the part after, I think the guy in the first round probably gets a little bit more press, a little bit more notoriety, but at the end of the day, they're grouped into a pool of players, Oiler prospect players, and we're trying to develop as many as we can. And whether you're a first or a sixth or a seventh round pick, at the end of the day, if you make the team and you contribute, that's what we're looking for. So every pick is vital for us. Every pick is going to be to a mandate of our philosophy on the way that we want the Oilers to look in years coming. And we need this prospect pool to continue to grow for us to be successful.
Now, you talked about post-draft, but pre-draft, I know obviously at the scouting combine, you're able to talk to the players. Maybe let's actually talk about the scouting combine first. Obviously, it offers a firsthand look at the physical and mental capabilities of a player. But how tough is it for you and the scouting staff to not have that resource available to you this year?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think you gain a lot of knowledge. I think you gain, um, some physical knowledge as far as sending, getting test results back and sending them to, our fitness instructors, our strength and development coaches that, that's their area of expertise to see the potential of growth in these young men. A lot of them maybe have higher ceilings. Some maybe have tapped out. The level of maturity is such a vast difference between them. If there's a lot of room for growth, but a lot of times that's a longer window to develop as well. So the one thing that we do is before we head into our midterm meetings in January is anybody that requires to be on your list, if you're an area guy, you have to have a sit-down meeting. You have to have an interview with them. You have to already have gotten to know them. So that's kind of been really vital for us as far as, we had our meetings the end of January. We go back into the field for about a month to 6 weeks, and then, everything kind of gets shut down. So we actually have done a lot of the legwork, maybe not as much as maybe that we've wanted to do. We've had some video conferencing calls with a lot of kids, probably around the middle of April, the end of April. We're going to circle back through the wagons here probably in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We have meetings all this week. We have meetings next week. We have some kind of, some pro meetings with philosophies on how we want to, look at the team this week and then revisit the scouts and the draft next week, kind of put the finishing touches and maybe revisit some video conferencing from there.
Tyler, it's like you read my page of questioning beforehand because you're so elaborate on your answers that you keep answering the questions that I had prior up. My next one was, how different is it having those video calls as opposed to in person? Because obviously you can't replicate being in a room with someone and getting to know their energy and getting to know what they're really all about. Does it offer any challenges that you're doing this on video and not in person when you're talking to the players?
Not really, I would say. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we all have to remember that we're dealing with 18 and 19-year-old young men. And, I've got a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old at home. They're still trying to figure it out, So, some are more polished than others, obviously. Some have been put in the spotlight maybe a little bit more than others. You can't use that against them. At the end of the day, they're still developing young men. I think you have to keep that in the back of your mind. At the end of the day, you want a passionate guy that's committed to giving themselves every opportunity to be the best player that they can be. And everybody's different. Their timelines are different. And along the way, you need a lot of luck to happen. And you got to be put in the right position at the right time and have the right coaches and the development and to escape injury and to make sure that it all goes accordingly. And, they all think that they can come in and play immediately. I think some might, but some get a little bit of a quick lesson at training camp. These guys are good. These guys have families. These guys, they feed their families. They have their career. They're not going to just go away and let some kid come in and take their spot. So it's different with the video conferencing. I think you can take a little bit on punctuality, maybe. Are you early? Are you late? How you're dressed? But at the same time, these are kids that are changing. They're different kids than they're going to be when they're 22 and 23 years old. And at the end of the day, we want to have the best kid, the best young man that's ready at 22 and 23, and hopefully sooner. But that's really the ultimate goal.
Well, either way, we're in unprecedented times. Of course, you having to have these chats over video. But Tyler, I'm going to ask you a familiar age-old question, and you already kind of touched on it, but I'd like for you to maybe expand and elaborate on that. For fans and us in media, we always ask ourselves, will it be best player available or draft based on position? How do you weigh in on that?
You mean, we go through so many different scenarios. Obviously it's the politically right thing to say always that you need to take the best player. And it is. I don't think that you can ever have a luxury of having too many great defensemen, too many great forwards, not enough starting goaltenders. Every position is so vital for us. So obviously, I think when you look at the organization and you look at the blueprint that we've got with, the guys up front with, Leon and Connor and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Yamamoto taking a step this year, and you have, Clefbaum and Nurse and Bear taking a step, and Caleb Jones taking a step. And I'm, the guys that I don't mention, it's not in any slight, but you got a core mix of guys that you're looking at, and you have, Broberg and Bouchard and Lagesson and guys that are, kind of waiting in the wings to come up and develop at the right time. So we've got a good blueprint. We just got to make sure that we're adding those pieces are going to come from this draft at some point in time, whether they're through the wing and down the middle and on the back end or in net. I think we can improve in all areas, to be honest with you. I think if you look at the depth of the National Hockey League, you're always going to have to need, 14, 15 forwards. You're going to need 10 defensemen. You're going to need 3 goaltenders. We got to make sure that our depth is as good as anybody, and that starts at the draft table and drafting the right players.
Well, 14 months ago, you were hired on by the Edmonton Oilers, Tyler. Just transitioning on to the personal side of things, how have the last 14 months looked like since you were hired here with the Oilers?
It's been great. Obviously I was drafted by the Oilers in '91. It was my first team in the National Hockey League. I'm from Saskatchewan originally, and it's always kind of special. Your first team, you go on to play with other teams, and it becomes a business, and it becomes, your way of life. But you always kind of have a soft spot in your heart for that original team. And it's been a learning curve for myself to get to know the people in the staff, both on the amateur side and the pro side. Your strength and conditioning coaches, the coaching staff, the American Hockey League staff. So there's been a lot of dialogue. There's been a lot of, I wouldn't want to say teaching, but there's been a lot of philosophy change too. Ken Holland, I had the luxury of working with him in Detroit for the last 7-8 years and bringing that philosophy, the way that he wants his team to look, and just filtrating that kind of down into our scouting staff. So it's been challenging, but at the same point, it's an exciting time. We've got a great nucleus of young players, and I know the city of Edmonton and the Edmonton Oilers fans know that, and I know they're starving for some playoff action, and I know that we have to make a difference at the table, and we have no room for error, to be honest. We have to make sure that we're as ready as we can be. If we walk away there with our first and our fifth picks, and that's it. We got to make sure that we hit on those picks. We got to make sure that we're checking off these boxes that we're filling off as far as our blueprint going forward. And these young guys that are on the team right now, they're just entering their prime of their career. We gotta give these guys something to add, and that starts with us. So it's an exciting time. It's challenging, but it's exciting.
So when you talk about philosophy change, what exactly does that entail? Does that entail drafting players with character, for example, or they play a certain type of way? What exactly does that look like, Tyler?
Yeah, I think I don't want to give all our secrets away, but
as much as you can. At
the end of the day, the way that we want the Edmonton Oilers to look is different the way the Boston Bruins want to look. The difference, the way the Philadelphia Flyers want to look. and vice versa. We want to play with speed. We want to play with intensity and competitiveness. You have to be able to defend in this league. You look at last night, Dallas wins 1-0. So obviously there's so many little different aspects on the way that you want to look at the way the team is, but you want to have big defenders. You want to have fast defenders. You want to have guys that are able to score, guys that can win faceoffs, guys, those attentions to detail, I think that we did pretty good at, through the course of the season with the penalty killing and the special teams and goaltending. There's so many little games within side games that you can improve. And if you can just improve, 1 or 2% better in those areas, I think it improves the outcome for the whole team. So as far as philosophy goes, we want to be an exciting team. We want to be fast. We want to be competitive, and we want to be skilled. And, obviously when you look at the draft and you pick player number 1 to player 200, I think at that stage of their development or where they are, as you go later on into the draft, it diminishes in all those areas. That's why, Alexis Lafreniere and these guys are rated to go 1 or 2, because they are at the top of those spectrums in those areas. That doesn't mean that these other players later on in the rounds can't get to there. It just might take them a little bit more time, a little bit more developing, and a little bit more, maybe structure and maturity. So that's kind of what we're targeting and the way that we want our team to look like going forward. And we're going to have a lot of good options.
Well, you mentioned that you want to be a team that defends. You mentioned the game last night where John Klingberg scored the only goal of the hockey game. But it's safe to say that Oilers TV scored with having you on. Tyler, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate your time, and best of luck.
Thanks, guys. I've been waiting 7 months to do this. So,
well, hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Tyler.